volume down. That's interesting. Okay, I added you.
Hi.
Angie, two times. There's like
That's like
double
double
audio
audio.
happening.
Not for me.
I can hear myself.
Oh yeah, that's your mic.
I can't turn my laptop down.
Just hit mute.
I'm trying.
Oh,
Speak.
yes, hello.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Hello, friends. Welcome to Boring Dog, where we decode the riddles of the modern dog training world. Today we are talking about why we have to communicate in our dog's first language rather than ours, which is a common thing that we come up against with people. People are often trying to communicate in our first language, which is verbal, whether it's English, French, Mandarin, Spanish. It's verbal. So a human being's first language is verbal. And that's obviously not a dog's first language. While we can teach them words to respond to, we do need to translate those words into their first language, which is physical touch. And that feels uncomfortable to most people, again, because we don't speak that way. That's not our first language. And it's totally normal for that to feel uncomfortable for us. Um, but we want to help you become comfortable with that because we're not going to have any success with our dogs if we try to sidestep this, if we try to work around it and speak a language that they don't understand. While we have the ability to learn and speak their language, it doesn't make sense to refuse to do that and to refuse to speak it and then have this like communication breakdown for the entirety of our relationship with our dog. So okay, the reason why we're uncomfortable with this is because oftentimes when we're communicating physically with a dog, we're trying to communicate a boundary, or we're trying to like get them to comply with a command or just like a desire that we have. Um, and so with a human, we would never do that. And if we did, if we tried to communicate a boundary, with physical force of any kind or physical anything, not even force, but just if we're physical while trying to communicate a boundary, immediately as humans, we go into anger, frustration, like all kinds of sort of negative feeling states. And that's not how dogs do it. And so we need to be able to, and they're not going to trust it. So if we communicate with the dog physically while we're angry, which is pretty much the only way we're ever communicating with a human, a boundary while we're probably got into that state by being frustrated. That's not something that a dog is going to easily follow. It's not something that's going to feel good to us. And so we have to figure out a way to remove the emotion from the physical communication. And so the way that we do this is just to be able to get our owners or our clients to be able to duplicate this. I mean, we can do that with our own physical body, with our hands, or like a bump of we could use our knee or a toe tap, things like that. But again, not the average person is not going to be able to do that without an emotion or without it like if they didn't have the emotion to start with, it comes up when they deliver that boundary. So we like to use tools such as the prong collar and or the e-collar in order to mimic that language.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the first thing that comes to clients' minds when we explain to them this whole philosophy or this idea that instead of trying to like trick your dog into a certain behavior or like bribe them, we're going to use their language. And then people go like, what, well, like, am I going to bite them? Or like, what? I think people get confused about how to use that physical language, which is then obviously when we lead into the tools we like to use to mimic this. And typically, like in a session, if we're explaining this to someone brand new to this idea, we would have, well, this is just how I do it anyway, to kind of like go through the motions, but I'll start showing them a slip lead, and like on my hand, and when you put pressure on a slip lead, it will like pinch the skin moves on your hand, and so then you're able to like visually show someone, like when I put pressure on the leash, there's like a little nip kind of thing happening on my skin, and some dogs will find that valuable enough, just like a pop on a slip lead, but I do then explain to clients, the same as like you were saying, certain like foot taps or like different ways to correct a dog physically that requires skill, like via a trainer. Most owners aren't going to have that like skill or timing, or like know even how firm or not firm to do it, and that's where the slip lead can get a bit tricky too. Like owners don't use the slip lead like properly, and then it doesn't have any protection of the throat. Like a slip lead's going to keep constricting until the dog like coughs or chokes, which obviously we want to avoid. Even though we're trying to mimic like a nip around the neck, we don't want to put like any pressure or damage on the trachea. So then I'll like explain that, and then move on to the prong collar and show them how it still mimics that nip, the same as the slip lead, but you're going to have to be much lighter with the leash, which is helpful for people. They can like feather the leash, and B, it's protecting the trachea because of the way that the prong collar delivers pressure on the neck. It's like evenly the whole way around, so we're going to protect the neck that way. But that's kind of because like what you started this whole conversation with is, okay, we're gonna like speak the dog's language, it's physical, so from what we know of that, it's like a nip, it's teeth, it's like the dog's going to use their teeth to set a boundary, or like a body check or something sometimes, from another dog to like set a boundary, but typically it's like a little nip. And straight away we want to point out, like, no, we're not going to use our teeth to do that, we use tools to mimic that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not dogs. We don't have the ability to communicate the way that they do. But again, if we're going to be successful in communicating with them, we do need to learn that language. And it's as silly to me, like the fact that we have the ability to do this and we choose to avoid it is as silly as, like, imagine traveling to a foreign country, and like personally, when I've traveled, most of the world knows how to speak English or wants to learn how to speak English. That's been my experience traveling in the Middle East and in Europe, and like anywhere that I've gone where English is not the first language, people are able to speak it or are learning to speak it and want to practice. And so I never had to learn, although I wanted to, I never really had to learn that foreign language of the country I was in. Rather, they spoke, because we both spoke English, they just spoke English to me rather than trying to like have me try to figure out Arabic on the spot. It just doesn't make sense if you both know a language, or if one of you has the ability or is already kind of like working on learning your language. So that's kind of how silly I see it when people are so resistant to speaking the dog's language. I understand, because it doesn't come naturally to us. And if there's, and we'll get into this, but there's all kinds of messaging about how it's wrong and it's inhumane and it's cruel and all of that. So I get that. But once we kind of like move past that block, it's just silly to have this ability to speak to our dogs directly, clearly, and choose not to. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I think what inspired me to want to talk about this topic is because I wanted to really like hone in and like make a point of that, even though we know this, and we know this because we've seen it work like every day, and we can observe other dogs and watch how they're doing it, to an owner who this like is new to, or they just don't, which was me once upon a time. Like I had no idea that like that was how I had to train my dog. And when you look online, that's definitely not what it's showing you online. So then when I did see or hear, like when you first look at a prong collar, you're like, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah.
And like I've said this before, I showed it to my husband when we first were going to use it with Bruin, and he was like, there's no way I'm putting that on my dog. And that's because that's our natural human reaction, to be like, that looks like a medieval like torture device.
Yeah.
Why do we need to use that? Like, it doesn't look good. And that's one of the first things too. If I get it out in a private session, I'll be like, okay, there's no beating around the bush here, it looks awful. But then really just explaining and kind of going off topic a little bit, but not, because it's important about the tool. But the different types of prong collars make such a ridiculously huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think the people that have such a big issue with prong collars have seen them used, like the shitty cheap ones, and the ones that are actually like putting holes in the dog's neck. And the reason for that is because the prongs are actually touching.
Right.
I went to a private session today and they had bought a prong collar from like PetSmart, because they were at their wits end, like they couldn't even walk their dog, and they were just like, oh my god, I need something. And the shop assistant in PetSmart like led them to the prong collars.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I know. I was
Unusual.
Yeah. Well, yeah, surprised, but that happened, and it did have a kind of martingale, but a fabric, and it didn't have a center plate, and the prongs touched, so they were pretty long, and they met together when the martingale was engaged, and so that's when it's actually going to pinch the skin, like it's actually going to squeeze the skin in between the contact points, and that's when we're going to see like marks on the dog's neck.
Well, and it potentially would puncture the right, and that's what people are afraid of.
Exactly. So there are tools out there that are doing what people are afraid that they're doing. Just because they're cheap, like knockoff versions of the ones that are doing what we say is, it's like grabbing, scruff, and letting go. The Hermsprenger prong collar that we show all the time and we talk about all the time, the links fully miss. Like they'll never, no matter how you pinch it, they're never going to touch because of the way it's designed. So it's not puncturing holes in your dog's neck to like actually bite them. It's grabbing the scruff and letting go in the same way that a dog would nip, because that's what we're trying to mimic. We're trying to mimic a nip, not a like grab, hold, and puncture
in for the kill.
Not a bite. So definitely like the different types of tools can give really bad impressions on like utilizing the physical language. Ones that I guess just aren't mimicking the language very well.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that a mom dog, or even just two dog friends that are communicating a boundary with each other, they have the ability to hurt each other, but if they're communicating in a healthy way and they're both like balanced, regulated dogs, it is going to be a pretty assertive like nip of the scruff and let go, with the ability to be able to grab and puncture, but that's not what they're doing. And so if the tool isn't mimicking that, and there's also not any like emotion, at least not the complex emotions that humans carry. There might be like a moment of frustration and then they kind of shake it off and carry on playing, or they take space from each other or whatever. So when you use the tool, you really want to picture like, what exactly is it that I'm trying to mimic, and think about like, if a dog was in this situation, let's say you got like jumped on by a dog and you wanted to set a boundary that, hey, I don't actually want to be jumped on. How would a dog advocate for their own space if they've been like mounted or jumped on by another dog? You want to try to mimic that as best as you can. And I know, again, this is a foreign language to people, but this is going to be the way that we have the best success with our dogs. And you can use a knee up, or you can have a leash on with a prong collar on and give a pop back, or the tool, again, just allows kind of like the average dog owner to be able to set that boundary clearly, humanely, right there in the moment, shake it off and move on.
Yeah. But there is no beating around the bush that like it does feel uncomfortable to use a language that you wouldn't use. Like I wouldn't just slap you around the face if you like upset me or crossed the boundary. We would talk about it and like use our language to establish boundaries with each other. So I think people just straight away think to like children often like, oh, well, we know that it's bad to discipline a child by just slapping them. We now know that like we can use our words and like explain to children boundaries. You can't do that with a dog. So I think that's like being carried across with like, well, now we know a better way to communicate. It's like, wrong species. Like,
we don't know a better way, because dogs haven't evolved the way humans have. Like it's exactly that. It's a different species.
Can't wait till they have like little inputs that mean like probably won't
like
be long.
a Neuralink thing for a dog.
Yeah,
Come on,
wild.
Elon. Elon, we need you to make us a e-collar that's as thin as a Fitbit, and we need a Neuralink translator for a
So
dog.
it's not super clunky. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. We did ask someone that once at a seminar, like why it was the dog trip people, I think. Why are they
Hmm.
still so like big and clunky when an iPhone has everything that it has?
It does, it baffles me still, and I, I feel like somebody's going to steal my idea, but that's what I want to invent and become millionaires so that we don't have to train dogs anymore.
Yeah. Okay, let's discuss. So today I had this new client. I had a client. They bought this prong collar. We switched it out right away to
Mhm.
a Springer, and it works like right away. Because
I
this
was,
dog didn't care about this cheap collar either. Like it wasn't even doing
yes.
anything for her.
Yeah.
The second, so what I did when I arrived, actually, because I noticed right away she had this prong collar on, I was like, oh, cool. But I could see the fabric martingale, so I'm like, okay. Um,
Hmm.
so it's okay. Just gonna stop this here, get this out, show you this one, showed it to her. We fit the Springer to the dog. And then I said, I want to do that all again and change nothing
Yes.
other than what your leash is attached to now. I
Yeah.
didn't really give her any instruction. I said, because she was really barking, I said, just give the leash like a quick pop when she barks, but otherwise do nothing different.
Hmm.
Because could see like everyone has an instinctive skill with the leash. Like you watch
Yes.
people doing it all the time, but the leash is attached to
Yeah.
something
Harness
wrong,
or
like a
yeah.
harness. Yeah, so it's not, the message is getting cut off. It would be like cutting your phone line and then trying
Yeah.
to use your phone. It's like, no,
It's not
you
getting
have
through.
to plug it in. So we went back again, and with it, this was in the first 5 minutes of me showing up. And the dog barked. I was outside the door. I heard her pop. Well, I assumed she popped because the dog stopped. I think I heard her say no. Opened
Hmm.
the door. The dog was losing it the first time, and it just was like wiggly, but not like losing its mind. And she just was like, okay, thank you, bye. Like it was just such a quick, like, okay, what the hell? This is like all I
Yes.
needed.
That's
And
the
it was
crazy
just
thing.
attached to the wrong thing. It was just
Yeah.
not doing what it was supposed to.
Yes. And people are so resistant to tools for so long until they use them and then they're like, I don't like, why didn't I do this 6 months ago? We could have been like way past this point.
Yeah.
And it really is like it's not a shortcut, but I suppose it is. Like it's a hack, but it's not because it's just exactly how dogs communicate. So it's really just like the way.
Yeah, I don't think it's a shortcut. I think the other way is a long cut.
Yeah, exactly. You're like doing that's what I mean by the language thing. It's like you're you both know English, but you because you know Mandarin, you want to try to speak Mandarin to this person that doesn't know it. It's like just freaking speak English. Like it just doesn't make
However, I will say that's not to say that methods other trainers use don't work full stop. Like you can still, if you're a trainer and you're good with your timing and your clicker and your food, like obviously people are successful with the other method. Otherwise, they wouldn't use it.
But hang on though. Like I hear that a lot that like and I'm not saying our ways like there's like the industry of dog training and the science and all of that and then there's just like observing nature and what works and to me like I've talked about this since forever nature is like the best guide and the best blueprint and you can look at it and study it and then create like different theories and stuff but you can't deny just objective reality and that is that yeah it can be effective by avoiding certain things and managing and all of that. But if you actually want to like stop and like let your dog understand that you disagree with a behavior, you can avoid that behavior and teach them an alternative behavior and all of that. You can sidestep the whole thing and be successful in that the dog doesn't practice that behavior anymore because you've like curated this environment and um just avoided it essentially. But as soon as your dog is put back into that situation, I just really doubt that like they understand that you disagree with that and they need to not ever do it again. You have to directly address it in order for that. Like you can't just avoid a conversation and then just pretend that the conversation was had and the dog understands.
Well, I mean, people do it all the time. Like people, that is what people do. They just avoid uncomfortable conversations and then they go their whole life
Yes.
with it festering inside of them. So it's like, and so dogs can people can exist with their dogs without addressing certain things, and they can get the life that they wanted with their dog by using food and like avoidance.
Yes.
They can, not to say that it's the best way or the healthiest, but they can get the result they wanted in some cases with some dogs using food.
That I agree with, but you just can't say to me that the dog understands you don't want it jumping on you.
No, they don't get that at all. I did totally forget when I brought up the use of food. I do forget why.
Well, I'm going to use this intermission to make a suggestion because, and this has nothing to do with dog. This is a tech suggestion because this is going to live on YouTube.
Yeah, I have already. I don't know if you noticed, I took off my mic.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because it's gonna hear the phone through the laptop. The audio is gonna be wrecked on our laptop. So this is non-existent anymore. This is your audio's coming off my phone right now, so it's going to pick that up on my laptop, and when you save the recording, the audio on the laptop's going to be wrecked.
I don't
but
quite
it's okay. I'll just explain it to you after. But basically, we'll save this Instagram live and we'll upload it to Instagram. And then once we sort out our tech.
So we look at each other on Instagram, not on YouTube.
Yeah, basically this could go if you want. The laptop.
I don't know if I believe that just yet. So I'm just gonna keep carrying. We'll just see.
It can be an experiment, but I scratched the mic and I'm looking at the screen because.
Okay. Well, what's hilarious is that every time I glance over at the computer, I'm looking this way and you're looking that way, and it's just gonna look hilarious.
Right. To me, it looks like you're looking at me, so it's fine. But yeah, I'll explain the tech side of it to you later. If anyone who doesn't know Angie and me, Angie is not the techie one, and I'm still not, but it's pretty funny in our dynamic when we're trying to launch certain things and explain things. Well, that was a good an example of language that sometimes gets even messed up in human communication too.
Yeah. Well, I could have just not communicated that to you at all and just felt awkward about it the entire time.
Yeah, there we go. At least it's I was waiting to bring it up, but we're on a roll, so
yeah. Okay. Sad because I look better in the computer camera. Yes, where we were about to get into something.
Yeah, let's go back to our notes and just make sure we're keeping on track.
Okay, so we've gotten to tools allow us to communicate the way the dogs communicate, and people typically regret not starting sooner. Go ahead.
Yes, so we've discussed a lot about the prong collar, I guess, and the idea of okay, we utilize the prong collar because it allows us to mimic that nip on the neck, the same way a dog would set a boundary by giving a nip on the neck with another dog. And then this kind of in a private session or with a client, always how it kind of graduates to the e-collar, because people straight away see the fallout of how impractical this could be at certain times. Okay, well, how do I stop my dog digging in the yard? Or do I have to have the prong collar and every time someone comes over? Suddenly people start piecing together okay, I have to be on the end of this leash and I have to activate the nip in order to communicate the boundary. Which obviously is doable. You just have to use management a bit more. If the dog's in the yard, we're going to have a long line on maybe attached to the prong collar so that you could interrupt digging, or every time a guest comes over, we kind of got to prepare and train for that, and have the leash attached to the prong collar to be able to set that boundary. So we use the prong collar to set a boundary in any case, really. Like I say, the idea is mimicking that nip. So anything you want to say no to, when you put pressure on the prong collar in a pop motion, that's going to mimic that nip. And if we're trying to coach a dog onto a surface or give them guidance in a certain area, then we're going to give continuous pressure, that kind of continuous nip, and then releasing the pressure when they're doing the thing that we want.
Mom picking up a puppy.
Right. Yeah.
Where she wants.
Exactly. So that's the kind of pressure that we're going to use, paired with spatial pressure. So we're also going to use our body positioning as well with that too. So it's not just the language of the prong collar, but we're also using you know, shoulders up, arms
Yeah.
strong. Like our instructions are always like, okay, let's lose the like noodle arm and like have a solid grip on the leash, and really like mean it when you guide your dog somewhere. Don't kind of, so often people like use the prong collar and then they're looking at the dog like, do you know what's like, do you know what you're doing? So really being believable when you're giving the prong pressure. But the other piece of this and what we bring up is then why we use the e-collar is because of all of these things we've discussed. The e-collar is just going to allow you to deliver that same nip mimic sensation to the neck, but now you can be like apart. So the dog could be in the yard and you could give them the correction without having to be out there. In the dog's mind, that would be like the yard setting a boundary with them. So the e-collar just allows us to still communicate boundaries, but without always having to be on the end of the leash. And again, ties into that piece of emotional neutrality. So most owners, if they're trying to set a boundary with the prong collar like leash, if it's like jumping up, or I just see this quite often, they'll like then get kind of real rough with the leash, and you can see they're almost agitated, not agitated, but as soon as a human is being physical, we now have that like emotional piece to it, whereas to just like kind of click a button and remain neutral, it's way better for the dog, where like you can just be like, and the intensity can be really ramped up, so you can dial up on your e-collar if it's a really firm like F no, we can be high on the e-collar, but our demeanor can be like really nice and calm.
Which then helps translating our verbal language when we just say no, but there's a abrupt like definite no. Now we're teaching our dog to respond to like just a civilized tone rather than like get out of the garden or like whatever it is that we're screaming. We don't have to scream anymore because rather than turning up the volume of our voice, we can turn up the intensity of the e-collar.
Yeah, totally. But one thing I always like to be really diligent in explaining to people is the prong collar, pretty much you can just like get straight to work. You can put it on your dog, attach to the leash, and we're pretty much good to go. Some dogs are going to be a bit more fussy or more sensitive than others, so there's ways to work around that, either a looser fitting prong collar in the beginning, just so it's a bit like more of a dull sensation, to like fitted tight up high. That's going to be really like intense for the dog right away, and if they're sensitive, then something a bit more loose fitting is going to be better. But it's attached to a leash which they're, I hope, familiar with, which is attached to you. So they have that visual cue of like, oh, okay, you're holding the end of that leash. Like this pressure's coming from you. When we then put on an e-collar, if you just put on the e-collar and put the dog out in the yard, there are some cases with the right dog and the right person with the remote in the hand that you can start kind of setting up boundaries right away. But most of the time, our recommendation is going to be when you first are using that e-collar, have a leash on still too, to be able to, because otherwise the dog, and we hear this a lot from people who are against e-collars, like, well, I've seen a dog that got like tapped once and they like hit the deck and hid under a car and they've been scared to go outside ever since. And it's like, yeah, no shit, because someone just like tapped a button and they thought the sky just like zapped them. So without like the context of the leash, sure, that is probably gonna freak your dog out.
Well, and teaching them what to do with that pressure. So again, and in the case of like two dogs communicating, if just suddenly like a thunderbolt came out from another dog or from wherever, that's weird. That's not a natural way to communicate. So we have to teach that language first, teach them what to do with that information first before being able to just like let them free in a yard and deliver the information without any like other context.
Yeah, exactly. So just a few things like, yes, we strongly believe that like communicating with your dog in their first language, physical, mimicking that as best as you can in whichever way you can. We appreciate some of our followers are in countries where tools like prong collars and e-collars aren't actually allowed. That doesn't mean that you can't utilize our philosophy and you can't use our training methods. It's really not about the tools. And we've had this discussion too, because it's always being discussed about banning them. It doesn't matter. Like, yes, e-collars are rad because you can have your dog off leash and like most people where we're living want to be able to hike and camp and like do adventurous stuff,
Yeah.
which you're always going to be competing with nature, no matter like how freaking well your dog is trained. If there's a bear or a deer or like their prey drive gets activated in some way, like it's toast. Like, or like maybe not every time, but yeah, you're always going to be competing with that. With the e-collar, you just have that, like, it's so cool that you can just have that like leash
Direct
on
line.
and control no matter what. But sure, if they're going to get banned because of stupid people, then it doesn't matter. We can still communicate with them in that physical language. It's just going to look more like a long line on. I don't know if these countries would still ban something like a martingale, like a fabric martingale collar.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it is getting a little silly out there. But again, regardless, and we've noted this here too, that like the tool isn't the thing, it's the perception of you. The tool is creating a perception of you that you mean what you say and you will follow through and you know what you're doing. You know how to speak their language. So you can learn that without tools. It's definitely like a little bit more challenging for people. So the tool is just, it makes that easier for you, but it's not
There's a
impossible.
bit more of like a skill aspect involved
Yeah.
when it comes to not using a tool like a prong collar or e-collar, I guess.
Well,
Like,
and you do have to like, I mean, with a tool, you still want to have like a certain energy about you when you're using it, but you need a lot less of that with a tool. But without one, you really do need to foster this like, I hate to say calm
believable.
assertive because that's Caesar's thing, but truly you have to be super calm and grounded and regulated, but also like equally assertive and like mean what you're saying and follow through and be willing to do that with your hands if you need to. And by the hands, I mean like if you've recalled your dog and they're not coming to you, go get them. Don't stand there and like try to negotiate with them or coax them or like just go make it happen. So you can do that without a tool. It's just a little harder. And it takes more, it's just a tool is convenient. Like it's less convenient to have to walk over and go get your dog, or if they're on a long line, like actually use it. It's definitely less convenient, but it is so important. And the point is the perception of you that your dog has.
Yeah, and you've used the example. I forgot, I lost my train. Of you're like, we all have an iPhone. Why would, and like iPhones exist and they help us do like so much in so many
Right.
ways. And some, like my husband said this, well, I just want to get a flip phone. And I'm like, sure, you could go get a flip phone if you want, but like good luck next time you go like anywhere where you get an email, or for like flip phones don't have email. So yeah, you can get around, but life's going to be way harder for you now because everything is online. Like,
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
they made it that way so that now you need like a smartphone. Otherwise, it's pretty difficult to just do anything.
Mhm.
And so doesn't mean that he couldn't go off and get a flip phone and exist fine, but
Yeah.
certain things are going to be really frustrating and like challenging, and certain things he's just not going to be able to do
Yeah.
because he just doesn't have the tool that enables him to do that. So I really
Yeah.
love that analogy.
Mhm.
Like, sure, there might be another way to do it, but why would we when there's an easier way?
Yeah, and that doesn't make you wrong or bad that that you want to make your life easier. It's okay to do that.
And your dog, like, either way, it doesn't make a difference. Like, at the end of the day, it's a physical something that's
Yeah.
going to teach your dog unwanted behavior, like that's going to teach them what you don't want. And I guess this comes back to your treat thing. You cannot teach a dog what you don't want with rewards.
Yeah.
It
You can't
doesn't.
teach any animal, human, dog, giraffe, shark, like no animal is going to learn what no means with a reward.
Yeah, it just doesn't exist.
Yes, this is like very basic animal behavior. And you don't need a PhD, you don't need to study animal behavior other than like just go look around in the world and just watch how people learn. People, dogs, giraffes, just watch how they learn and you will see. You don't need to read endless books and blogs and Instagram lives and all the things. Like you can just go out and observe this for yourself and then just implement it. And your life is going to be so much easier.
Yeah, it's such a funny, like, complex topic. We could go on for like literally ever, I think, about the whole like physical touch thing and just consequences, punishment. Like, at the end of the day, like, the idea is the same in terms of a consequence. Like, we get consequences that teach us boundaries. It's just they're not necessarily like physical, or like in some cases they are, like when a stove burns you, it hurts and you don't touch, or like when you learn things that are hot, like really are hot, and it like leaves a lasting like ow, we learn. But there
or
are
it's
other
just
ways.
uncomfortable. Like if you get a five, I use this one all the time. If I get pulled over for speeding and I get a warning or a $5 speeding ticket, that doesn't hurt. It doesn't sting very much. It's kind of inconvenient, but it's certainly not going to make me think twice the next time. It's not going to stick in my memory of like, oh, I didn't, that was like really uncomfortable last time I got pulled over. Whereas if I get a $500 speeding ticket, $5,000, like as we up the discomfort of the consequence, it's still a consequence, a warning, but the more uncomfortable it is, not traumatizing, not painful, like none of that, but just uncomfortable enough to stick in the memory of like, this is a thing that didn't end well for me last time, so I'm not going to do it again next time. A warning isn't going to stick in your mind that way. Same for your dog. Like say
Or
yeah.
avoiding it. Like if the cop, like you say, if the cop pulls you over and like gives you $5 for wearing your seatbelt,
Didn't tell me
but
about
just ignores the speeding,
yeah.
that's not going to stop you from speeding.
I have no idea. The speeding isn't even in my mind, and I don't even know that the cop disagrees with it. So this is where like we need to be direct, we need to be clear, we need to be fair, we need to be assertive, we need to follow through. Like if we don't do all that stuff, the dog's never going to have any idea that we actually disagree with these behaviors.
Yeah, and it's not cruel to have these boundaries.
It's
I did a post recently, and one of the comments, it's like stuck in my head so bad, because that like just it comes from an innocent place. Like, although it's frustrating, I think what frustrates me is like how we got here. But the person commented, my wife never says no to any of, like, me and my wife never say no. They only live a really short life, and we don't think it's fair to say no to them. And I'm like, in what world is that kind? Like, why do we feel that it's kind to never say no to a dog, like to give them everything they want all of the time, never set a boundary with them? Like, why
it's
is
not
that
kind,
kind?
it's confusing. The dog now has no idea what's expected of them, where any boundaries are like that. Imagine how unsafe that would feel if you're in a family where no one communicates boundaries with you ever, and it's all just like it's not even happy and positive. It's just like avoidance and lies and like deceit and manipulation. Like that's not just
Everything's a transaction too. Like, hey
yeah.
Angie, can you make me a coffee if you clean my car?
Yeah, only if I get something out of it. Like, how horrible of a relationship is that?
And I think so many owners know this. I think they like try, most people's journey is like they've tried a few trainers, like they've
Mhm.
used food, and then they've got to this point where they're just like, this feels terrible. Like, either
Yeah.
because my freaking pockets are full of like slimy beef juice, or like
Yeah.
one day I didn't have treats and then I was stuffed. Like,
Got
people
played.
figure out the like the the
Oh.
yeah, oh,
Robyn learned a new word the other day.
the pitfall
Yeah.
of this, just by like default, because it does have many,
Yeah.
and then they're craving like, what's the other answer? And when this is explained, they're like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that they still feel uncomfortable. And me too. Like, I don't enjoy, like, when I have dogs come in that are really like, maybe they've never been told no, super bratty,
hmm
entitled. They just think they can like push and shove and scream and shout and like
hmm
just like bulldoze their way around things. When they get told no in a meaningful way, I keep losing my train. I think it's the comment section that like throws me.
Good.
I was on such a I forgot, it's gone.
Why don't we read the comment?
Yeah, okay.
Took the show. It's a good one. It says, when you hold back from doing what you know is right, who are you really serving? It's easy to call it compassion, but sometimes the truth is you're just protecting your own comfort, which is like a summary of every private session we've ever done.
Yeah, exactly.
Well
I
said.
think that's kind of where I was getting like, okay, yeah, so I have this super bratty dog in, like now I have to like correct and like go over the top with setting boundaries with this dog because it's never been told. It doesn't
Mhm.
feel good, like at
Yeah.
all. It's like, okay, this is rough. Like now I have to
But
also when the dog comes in with that energy, okay, now I have they have to be met with this like
yeah.
just very like assertive, neutral, not very soft at all.
Mhm.
And as like a week goes by with this dog and they soften and they realize like, oh God, this feels good. Now I can soften.
Yeah.
But the discomfort, the uncomfortable boundary setting in any relationship, even in friendships, like you
Yeah.
and I have had some of the worst conversations of like, hey, you're a bit of a dick sometimes.
Yeah.
And your skin like crawls, it
Horrible.
feels horrible. Like both of us sit there like feeling rubbish, but they're so important, and like that's what enables us to
And
actually be close is by just
exactly. And what feels worse is if we never spoke about those, like if we never just addressed those uncomfortable moments and spoke a boundary or a discomfort or whatever and just let it fester, I don't think we would have a friendship still.
no, I agree. Yeah, I think eventually like there it comes a breaking point. Something
Mhm.
happens for one person where it's like the final straw, and because you've never voiced, you've never spoken about it, it's just like I'm done.
Which is the equivalent of euthanasia or rehoming or
Rehoming, yeah.
yeah, you just get to a point where you're like, I can't deal anymore because you never addressed. And it's actually like a lot less uncomfortable to just start the relationship off that way, where we're just going to have the uncomfortable conversations when they come up, and then it just like goes away. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And that and it's like uncomfortable for not very long. Like
Yeah.
it's like, you utilize this language, this physical language that feels not good to you, but you don't have to do it that much, especially if you're consistent with it.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you add the physical touch to your no that you try so hard to sound really believable when you say, if you
Yeah.
just stop like screaming and actually use the dog's physical language whilst you say no the first time,
Yes.
eventually all you have to do is just say no, or
Yeah.
like a click, or just your presence alone then becomes like, oh yeah, should probably
Yeah.
stop that. Because now the dog, and we again, you use the analogy all the time of like when you're driving, if there's a civilian behind you, whatever, you are texting, speeding, like
Mhm.
whatever, cop behind you, phone is
Yeah.
like in the pocket, you're like checking your
Yes.
speed,
That's
because you
behavior.
know that there's a consequence like lingering behind you. And that's
Right.
kind of the perception that we want our dogs to have of us when they're around us. Like
Yeah.
we're not like scared of police. It's just like, oh yeah, okay, there's
Well,
the
and I mean, hopefully, if we have like a healthy relationship with authority, not only are we not scared of them, we're grateful that they like hold it down for us so we don't have to walk around scared of like all of the world because we know there's structure, boundaries, there's like people will be disciplined for bad behavior. Like these
yeah,
are good things. And obviously there's corruption in every whatever. That's like a whole different conversation. But
yeah,
yeah, these are authority is good and your dog wants it from you. They're like begging for it. And often we see it like in some cases for years we see it brewing. And then one day out of nowhere, the dog makes a bad decision and it's like, no, the dog has been asking you for guidance for years and
yeah,
here we are today. It's not out of nowhere.
yeah. I do with like roughly sort of 15 minutes to go. We had some really good questions that I think are
Yes.
going to like tie really well into this conversation anyway.
Awesome.
And this kind of ties in with the like civilian cop perception thing. I
Mhm.
had someone message just before the chat because they weren't able to like add the comment at the time. And their question was our like most popular service and something that we believe like just is the best program is a board
Mhm.
and train, and they are concerned that the dog's behaviors stem from them, the owner.
Yeah.
Like, and I've heard this example before: the dog behaves great when they're at daycare or with the dog walker, and then when they come like around them, they're a nightmare. And
Mhm.
so, how is a board and train going to help if I just send my dog to you and they're like perfectly behaved when they come home.
Yeah.
So first of all, the reason we love the board and train and do it is because we do train on the e-collar, and it can be pretty tricky to teach an owner how to both teach, like how to use the e-collar, teach the dog the e-collar, and like give the dog leash guidance and timing. And there's just like so much there when it comes to e-collar training. For us, it's just second nature to condition. And so the board and train just allows for that. But then also the reason we use the e-collar is because then when the dog comes home to you, now we have a mutual language. That's the point. We teach the dog the e-collar so that then when they come home to you, you can speak that language to them. And not only that, but they're like really fluent in it too. They're fluent in the structure, in like the expectations. They have these new skills for how to navigate the world that they didn't have before, and they've practiced them again and again and again with us, that by the time they then come home to you, they're like so dialed on it because they've been immersed in it for 3 weeks, that they know more than you. So they're looking at you to be like, can you tell me to go on place, or like should I heal? Like they know more than you, so you just need to like speak their language, and it just like slides into place really nicely.
It's just much more easily transferable to the owner. And then we also spend, so the first week we spend conditioning the dog to the e-collar, so teaching that language to them, which is all we do. That's our full-time job. So all we do all day is like give dogs feedback on every single little minute decision they make through the day, which is all the things that the owner is missing at home because they're busy with other things like work or kids or whatever. This is not their full-time job. So it allows us to really give the dog feedback in every single moment, pattern this language, pattern a new way to respond to their triggers and all of just everything, a new way to just like exist in the world. And then we also are able to take them into many different environments. So that like prolonged, extended period of time that we have the dog gives us the time to then take that new language and all that new knowledge into the real world, so that it isn't just in this context of like training sessions at Angie's house or at Robyn's house, but it's like everywhere that you go, no matter how the circumstances changes, these expectations apply, including when you go home to your home with old associations and owners and all the things.
And that's why that 2 hour reunion sessions, like we love to do it at the owner's house, so that we can like, because typically you bring the dog home and sure, they're in an old environment, so they kind of slip back into like habits, but we're there for that session, for that moment where they come home and they're like, oh cool, like there's no rules here. We're actually there to like be there for that moment with the timing and show that, and you watch the whole thing unravel for the dog where they're like, and we see a lot of like itching at the e-collar in the reunion session because the dog, and they haven't itched at all during training, but then they get home and they're like, no, this like doesn't happen. This doesn't happen here. What is this thing? And that's the pivotal moment for the dog where they're like, oh wow, like this is a thing. Okay.
And this is the perception thing too. And we're also able to then like go out into the dog's neighborhood where they have like, oh, like Ruby around the corner in the yard that barks at me every time we walk by. Well, now we can walk past Ruby's yard and the owner is holding the leash. And sometimes in some cases we're operating the e-collar while the owner is holding the leash. And so the dog suddenly looks at the owner with like brand new eyes. And it's like we've kind of like, it would be like if I could give Robyn my body and have her train it. So I don't have to go to the gym. She does it all for me. She hands back my body with that's ripped, and all I have to do is maintain it, which is hard. I'm not saying like all I have to do as in it's easy to maintain. It's not. It's still work once the dog goes home to maintain all this.
Definitely.
But the legwork is done for you. And man, if I could actually, I think I would prefer doing the hard work of earning my own body. But wouldn't it be great if we could just like
now, but old you would be like, sure,
absolutely. Like hand off a portion of your life, have someone else fix it, and then you just need to maintain it afterwards. That would be wonderful. And that's kind of like miraculously what we can offer with the board and train.
Totally. One thing I would say is some feedback that I've had recently from an owner who had a very similar concern. Just like, okay, the common story is always like my dog's behaves way differently with everyone else. As soon as she's with me, it's a nightmare. Is one thing I will say, if you're like feeling that way and that's you, to really, really put the work in yourself whilst the dog's away, and really making sure that you understand what is expected of you when the dog comes home from training. A lot of owners often say in the reunion, wow, you should have taken me for a board and train. And it's like, whilst the dog's away at a board and train, let's really focus on like, okay, when the dog comes home, what needs to be different? What schedule do I need to get on? Like looking into, obviously we're often posting stories of the dog's training like on Instagram. So just like doing your homework, I guess, to make sure that by the time the dog comes home, you know what your piece of the training is and how that you can like maintain it. And we do have quite a strict protocol that the dog goes home on, so that the owner can mimic life in the board and train at home as best as possible, because we've been able to,
but
for a short term, to do the exact thing that we were just talking about, like repattern new behaviors in an old environment. That's why we do that kind of like strict 90 days, so that you just really are able to proof the training around like tons and tons of different situations in their new home environment. And then after the 90 days, you can hopefully start to like loosen up and start to live sort of more aligned with how you want to live with your dog, but you have this language that remains that you always get to use. I think that answers that question pretty well. I'm gonna let you take this one away, but someone asked, like, how do I coach my dog through being scared of something? Like they don't want to traumatize the dog by like pushing them into it and like forcing them into the situation, but they also don't want the dog to be able to like be reinforced by like constantly getting out of the thing that they're scared of and like running away, or like putting on the brakes so much that they never actually have to do it. So they're like kind of confused about how to deal with that.
Yeah, well, we have to, again, with anybody, whether this is a person or a dog, we have to somehow teach the nervous system and prove to it, sometimes just once, but other times it takes like several repetitions of it, where you have to prove to the animal that the thing they think is going to kill them is not going to kill them. And the only way that we can do that is to expose them to it with guidance. We don't want to just expose them to it and let them just like deal on their own. So with some sort of guidance, obviously we're fans of tools of a prong collar and e-collar to create clarity and to be able to communicate when the dog is having that like freak out moment. But the dog needs some sort of anchor in that like psychological storm that they're having regarding the trigger. So we have to be able to bring them into it. We're regulated so the dog can like co-regulate with us. They can look at us and see like, you're not freaking out, but you're also not letting me get away. So we're blocking the flight response, which is run away from the thing in order to not die. And then what often happens, or I guess I should say sometimes can happen, is we block the flight response. So now we get a fight response, which is the opposite. It's still a survival pattern that wants to keep the animal alive. So flight would be to run away to save your life. Fight would be to fight the thing to save your life. So sometimes the thing is that trigger itself, or it's the thing that's making the trigger stay there or making the dog stay close to the trigger, which would be the handler. So that's where you get this like redirecting. The dog is like, yeah, F no, I'm going to fight you so that I can then run. So again, we're just in fight or flight survival mode. So we want to block that. We want to block the flight, block the fight, and achieve this like neutral space where the dog is actually thinking, not just reacting in a survival pattern, but actually like observing the trigger, realizing it's not dying, looking to us to see you're cool. So now we're kind of like co-regulating, and the dog eventually just kind of like, you might see some trembling, some whining, this like sort of release, this somatic release of like all of the tension. And then eventually they're just kind of like, oh, I didn't die. I didn't have to run away. I didn't have to fight it. It just was here. You handler were here for me. And so that's how we teach the dog over time that like it's nothing to be afraid of. And it actually can happen fairly quickly. It's just that people don't believe that to be true, so they drag it out
or they don't like watching their dog feeling that way. Like it's not nice to watch a dog like think they're gonna die. Ultimately, like when a dog is really fearful of something, like their body is sending them into like, oh my God, I'm going to die if I get close to that thing, or whatever the context of the situation is. They truly think that they're like going to die, which can be really tricky to what, like just upsetting to watch. And then add in the complex of like, okay, now you need to add physical pressure, like what people deem as like punish, you have to now like punish the dog for being scared. That in a human brain is like, okay, so I have to watch my dog be uncomfortable and then punish them.
Well, and I think that word punish, definitely there are cases where we're using tools to punish unwanted behavior, such as biting, jumping, like just unwanted, just bratty sort of unwanted behavior. This is not a case of punishment. The tools are a comprehensive language. So punishment is like a little sliver of that language, but we have all this other conversation that we want to have with the dog. So when we're using physical pressure to interrupt a survival pattern, we want to think of the dog, when the dog is in chaos, we want to think of that as a question like, holy shit, this thing, like, I'm really scared of this thing. I think it's going to kill me. Is it going to kill me? And we're saying, no, just like stay here. But we can't say that in English. There's no verbal language to be able to say that to the dog. So we have to do that physically. So we're interrupting the whole like outburst in order to come back to calm. Interrupt it, come back to calm. Interrupt it, come back to calm. And so it's a dialogue that we're having with our dog. It's not you're bad for being scared. It's, hey, I've got you. You don't need to be scared. And so there's a much different energy when we deliver that physical conversation. It's not the energy of this is a boundary, you need to cut it out immediately or there's going to be consequences. That's not the conversation we're having. What we're saying is like, hey, you're safe. I've got you. You're safe. You don't have to worry about this. You can like lay down your arms and just trust that you're going to be okay.
Yeah, totally. I think that hits the nail on the head. And I'm sure that topic's going to come up lots on these bi-weekly calls. So yeah, I think that sums that one up. One more question. Let me just check in here. Okay, I'm gonna ask this one.
Is it gonna cut us off on Instagram at an hour or has that changed? Okay.
Did it? Well, if it does, then see ya.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then yeah, we can answer it next week.
Yeah.
Or we'll add this, we'll probably upload this. Whatever, we'll see. We're wasting time. If that is the case. So, and this could go on for quite a while, but we'll try and answer it quick, I guess. Like, what is the difference between routine and structure? We always talk about your dog needs to have predictability and structure in order to like thrive in an urban environment or in like a pet dog home. But we're always saying like, don't have this like schedule where you feed the dog at 6 and then you walk at 7 and then and if that doesn't happen, then the dog's like demand barking at you and like misbehaving because you didn't stick to the routine. So like, what is the difference between routine and structure?
Yeah, I think it's important to be we want to have structure and so that the dog can see that like the world has bounds so that it's not just like a free for all and they don't know where the floor is or if it's going to fall out from under them at any point. Like we want to create structure so that they feel contained and safe and all of that. But when, like you said, when you have too much of a routine that's the same every single day, then we can very easily create anxiety in the dog when like life happens. So yes, we have the structure, we have 4 walls and a floor, that's always there. But within that structure, the same things roughly happen each day, but it might not be like at the exact same time every single day. And we might skip one of the things one of the days and not the other day. So you might have, and this is like my personal preference for feeding. For example, you might get breakfast and dinner one day and the next day you might just get dinner, or you might get it at like 8 a.m. one day or 10 a.m. the next day. You really need to have lots of flexibility with the routine.
Which works unless you're brewing, can I just add?
Go on.
Well, I don't know, it's probably my own fault, but yeah, he just like I tried that to stop him being obsessive about time and meals and dinner and breakfast, but it's just like too painful to even sit through.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, but yeah, I think what people get more obsessed with is the routine. Like people do really
Yes.
well with like following this rigid, like
But do they? Like I get what you're saying. Like people think that they do better with routines, but
no,
really it's
I think people do. I think certain personality types just do better. Like, and certain personality types, like yourself, don't.
how but okay, humor me for a minute. When you
Here we
say do
go.
better, you mean that they have less anxiety because there's a predictable routine that they know that that's going to happen.
I just think they can just perform better in other areas of their life when certain things like follow a certain routine. And
But would
like,
you say if it doesn't follow the routine and you have to just go with the flow, that creates anxiety.
no,
But
I think it's important to be able to deal with like a shift in routine.
right,
But like, so, okay, so routine is good for, I think for humans. I do think dogs don't have the ability to like understand so much. Well, I guess that's what we're saying. So they should be able to have the structure, but not like predictable every single day. But some people, for example, there's certain routines that I follow that if I get up and like do that structure, my day just like goes so much better. If it doesn't happen that way, it's fine. I'm not like falling apart at the seams, but like later on that day, it just like things just don't go as well, or like I can't show up as well as if I followed that routine, then I'm able to just show up like as the best version of myself. And that's one
right.
thing I think is different with humans and like
I think we're maybe saying the same thing actually. Like it's dogs need that too, but with the built-in flexibility of like if the routine has to change today, we're all going to be okay. Like we can
right.
adjust, we can go with the flow.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I'd say probably we are agreeing.
Yeah.
But I think that the reason why, because like humans like structure's good, routine's good,
Hmm.
is such a complex topic because it's like, yeah, it's great and it is really important. And like that's what our whole business is built off of, like the boring, mundane, repetitive, like that same shit stuff that you're just doing every day that brings you the best results,
But
but
not to
with
the point it
flexibility.
becomes, yeah, not to the point that it becomes like a mental prison where if I don't like turn my lock 4 times exactly every day and like brush my teeth for exactly 45 seconds or whatever it is, like you have to have flexibility within the routine, but do the same things every day. So the structure is there, the routines are there. But yeah, there just needs to be flexibility within that.
Yeah. And this topic actually came up for me and my dad kind of recently. We had like a heated conversation about this because we're very similar. Like the reason Angie and I get like, because I am like rigid and structured and like things the way they are. And Angie's like
Flow.
loosey goosey, just whatever. So we've just had to learn to like, how to function, I guess, like that as two people who need different things. But and so my dad is the same, like very just structured and like routine, and his dogs, they like one of them will like she needs to pee in the morning, so she whines them and she takes her out and then she comes in, and we hear this a lot from clients too, like, oh, she'll need to go out at like this time or whatever,
Yeah.
and then when they're with us they
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
because they've just learned the routine. It's not actually a need, it's just like this is what happens at this time in this environment with this person.
Mhm.
So it's not a need, it's just like I learned. And then like she needs to eat 3 times a day because well, no, she needs lunch because like she whines and barks and pay, and I'm like, she doesn't need it, it's
Yeah.
just that's become like habitual, where it's like he's like, yeah, but she sees me eating and she knows it's time to like eat, and I'm like, no, she doesn't. Like, and it would be really good actually if you could teach her to deal with that and like
Yeah.
not see you eat and be like, oh, I don't need to eat.
The amount of times, like we get, obviously we board dogs for training and then afterwards we board them for boarding. But the amount of times, and especially for dogs, this is
Oh,
rare.
I thought you were saying I thought you said we bore dogs, like we
Well,
and I was like, well, they do get kind of bored sometimes.
yeah.
That was funny.
But the dogs that come in for boarding that haven't been trained are these are the worst offenders because they don't know the drill yet. And it's rare. We don't often take those dogs. But the amount of stories that you and I combined could tell of the instruction manual that comes with some of these dogs for like their needs. And like it's not to, I don't want to make fun of anyone, but it's excessive. Like it's to the point that we've had to say in our intake form, like only what they need for their survival, like not their toppings on their meal or the bedtime songs or the poems you want us to read to them. Like they don't need all of the
Or
stuff.
like the feeding routine, people will often explain to me like this is what mealtime kind of looks like we'll do this and then this and then this
And
in
then
this
30 minutes
sequence.
later, we have to do this. And then 15 minutes later, it gets a bedtime story. And it's like,
Yeah, that's exactly why that topic, I think, because people are like, because structure is good for dogs, right? And it's like, yes,
yeah,
it's good, like structure and predictability within, like you say, the four walls, like within heel, within like when I ask you to go lay down, like
mhm,
every single time I follow through.
yeah,
Being predictable with like your expectations and like
yes,
structure within training is important, but you have to teach your dog to be able to adapt to
yeah,
a different feeding schedule, or like we get into a different car today or
yeah.
whatever. Some dogs just
Because
get
life happens. Like life
yeah,
happens, and you might be at a friend's house or an Airbnb or on a road trip, or the daylight savings time ends, or like
oh
life
yeah.
happens.
But again, I think it comes from humans with their like obsessive need. They need the routine,
Yeah.
they need the like routine to be able to cope.
And
And
that's what
so
I mean. Like, I think at some point it can become less helpful and more
yeah,
anxiety inducing. And it's something to look at. If you cannot cope because your routine is slightly off, whether your dog's or your own, like it just might be an invitation to look at like, why do I struggle to just let go?
I think that would be a really awesome topic for next chat. I think we could
Nice.
go to a whole bunch of places
Yeah.
with all of that, like anxiety. I definitely have some like anxiety attachment like conversations that I want to have. But I think for today we are at our time,
Yeah.
and I feel pretty good about that chat. And I hope that everybody found it helpful.
Yeah.
People are joining on now, so thanks for joining on. But we are going to be saying goodbye. We will see what happens with
I'm hopeful about
our,
the YouTube.
yeah, if we
Yeah.
can't upload to YouTube, then we'll save this to our Instagram. Instagram, if you could please figure out how to save Instagram lives, that would be super helpful. But yeah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's great. We did have a tip. I wanted to add the tip.
Cool.
We had a training tip for you all because we gave you a lot of information today. And so if you don't have tools, or if you do, either way, we want you to, if you're struggling with communicating with your dog, add a leash to your dog's whatever you're using, harness, collar, honestly, whatever at this point. Put a leash on and let them drag the leash around the house and use the leash to pair whatever you're saying to your dog of command, preferably not like poetry, but like when you say a command, pick up the leash and make it happen. And just have the dog drag the leash around the house just for, let's say, like a week. Try that for like 7 days in a row. And I think you'll find everything becomes more clear for both of you, for you and your dog.
And one more thing I'm going to add in there, like say the command like maybe once or twice
Mm-hmm.
and nothing else.
Yeah.
No
No,
chit chat, no like this is what, don't explain to them what you're going to do. The leash
it's
is
okay.
doing
You
the
can
explain.
do it. I
Yeah,
know
so
you know it.
exactly. Leash on in the house, utilize it for all of your, like have it as an extra element to your communication, but not only that, and remove your communication of the verbal excess chit chat. Like
Yeah.
stop explain. They don't explain to them. Show them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give it a
Nice.
while.
Okay.
DM us if you do it and it makes a change.
Yeah.
Okay, peace out.
Bye.
Bye. Hello?